Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. Today I want to talk about the fact that Treyarch have just recently rewritten their own rewritten history by removing something that was from the past but introduced in the future because it came after the future events of Black Ops 3 and it specifically only affects the alternative past that we see in Zombies Chronicles. It's a bit of a mess, but it's a fun mess. So let's jump into it. One of the things that I think a lot of people noticed when they were playing Chronicles for the first time is that there are a bunch of quotes in there that seemed to conflate different timelines. For example, Dempsey mentions the fact that he still has the blood vials in Origins. But if he still has the blood vials in Origins, that would suggest that he is thinking about the fact that he previously had them and then drank the blood and then got rid of them, supposedly, or at least some of them, and then wouldn't have them in Origins because Origins is the beginning of the loop, and so if he still has them, then he's aware of the fact that he's just gone through the loop, and so he's cognizant of that entire, basically, paradox, I suppose, and there's a whole load of issues with that. There were Richtofen quotes about Dr. Monty specifically, talking about Monty like he had all the knowledge in the world about him at that very beginning point, prior to his 2-year journey, because you've got to remember that Origins happened, and then there was the 2-year gap in which Richtofen went all over the place doing a bunch of different stuff, which is detailed in the timeline, and then reconnected with the Origins characters back at the Giant, and they continued on their journey. So that was really problematic as well, and there were several quotes in there that essentially took things that we knew from the past with the original maps from World at War and Black Ops 1 and made us kind of entirely rethink the way that they were standing in Zombies Chronicles. These aren't just those same maps again in Zombies Chronicles, there's a new flair there. And that kind of falls in line with things like the Gumballs appearing as well, and the Wonder Fizz. Things like that, old features that are now in the game, Widow's Wine being another one, that previously obviously didn't exist, but now by Treyarch have been shoehorned in, so we have this new experience in an old setting. So that itself was an interesting question to ponder, but then Noah did an interview with Jason Blundell a couple of days ago while I was at E3 in fact, and so I haven't had a chance to cover it until now, but I'm going to roll around a 2-minute clip here of a really interesting question that Noah asks and Jason, surprisingly, gives a fairly detailed answer to that I really didn't expect to hear him say. Here's the clip.
Okay, so now we're moving on kind of like to Zombie Chronicles, and I have a few questions about that. And the first of which is someone that I had kind of like from the beginning, right when I started playing, was how does Zombie Chronicles and the old maps play into the timeline? Do the new maps kind of like overwrite the old maps in terms of like what the canon is, or are they separate universes, separate times? Because obviously the first run through, and it's also kind of like a technical standpoint of you didn't have the gobblegums in the first one. Now we have gobblegums. There are new quotes that are associated with that. The characters in Origins know who Dr. Monty is. I've heard quotes from.
There was a little patch that came out, so that was actually a bug, that bit.
Okay.
So the patch came out and took out some of the lines. So one of the things that happened, and you should have seen it on the patch that just came out, was there's a bunch of lines that crept into the VO packs that weren't supposed to be there. So if you've got the latest patch, they should have been.
Okay. So minus the Dr. Monty part, then with the gobblegum machines and things like that. How did you want the community to interpret that and the two maps being the original and the remake?
Well, so I'll answer one part and I won't answer another part. So the one part I would answer is we tried in all aspects to be authentic to the original experience. Mm-hmm. And then there were certain systems that we added because obviously that's changed since World War to let's say Black Ops 3.
Yeah, exactly.
So there were certain natural changes that had to be done, but we tried to be authentic to the original maps as much as we could, and then we put little flares in, little things. Mm-hmm. But hopefully it's as one-to-one as we can get it, but with the benefit of the extra hardware and then updating the mechanics. Yeah. In terms of the statement of do they replace or sit in companion, I won't make a comment on that.
Okay.
So there are two parts to this, right? First of all, Noah basically says, how are these new maps playing into the timeline because of the fact that you've got all these quotes? So he's referencing the thing that I just talked about as well, the fact that these quotes alter our perspective of those past events. And Jason says, nope, it's a bug. Which really fascinates me, because that means that they, as I said at the beginning of the video, have taken a rewriting of history that they introduced with Chronicles, and a kind of even deeper rewriting to that rewriting of history with the quotes, and they have rewritten the fact that they were ever there in the first place by removing them. They have retconned their retcon in a retcon. It's a big old mess, but it's fantastic. So that's really interesting. But there's a really, really interesting distinction between the fact that they've removed the quotes, but obviously your gumballs are still there, Widow's Wine is still there, all those old features that were previously things like PhD and stuff like that, they're still gone. So there's definitely a distinction that Treyarch is drawing here, and it's something that I want to talk about a little more in this video. Jason also says that their goals with those maps in terms of interpretation of them was that they were trying to be authentic, right? They were adding some tidbits and giving little flares for the community, but hopefully keeping it as one-to-one as they possibly could. And I think they've done a fairly good job of that. I mean, the maps are pretty good representations of their originals. I think you would agree. They're obviously much more pretty now, but certainly in terms of the gameplay, they largely feel pretty similar for the most part. But Jason then says, in terms of does it replace or sit in companion, he won't make a comment on that. Now, I think that that's Jason basically trying to kind of avoid the whole conversation of, oh, you're just getting rid of Jimmy Z's maps and you're giving the community your own version of these maps. And I think that might be true to a little bit of an extent, but he glosses over that and doesn't comment on it. And so what I thought I would do in this video is go a little further than Jason did and talk about whether, indeed, these maps replace or sit in companion with that previous content. I was talking about this kind of general topic with a friend of mine, Liz, and she mentioned that there aren't just new perks and stuff in the maps, but the characters actually being there in the first place is an issue unto itself. You can actually hear a bit of this weird confusion from Monty in the radios that got added in the Chronicles DLC. For example, in Nachtrandtoten, Monty is talking about the map and he says he remembers it being really small, simple by today's standards, he thinks there was a fog, not a lot of it, certainly not coming into the building itself, and then he says, you know what I just realised? You weren't even there. At least, not at first. It was some other random, forgettable soldiers that had the misfortune to live through that horrible night, or Nacht, as it was actually known. There, I speak German now. So he says that in Nacht, and then in the following map, in Verrückt, he says the following. It was an asylum. It was also a horrible, terrible, grim, depressing place. I'd give you a full explanation of everything that happened there, but it would only be horrible, terrible, grim, depressing. Oh, F word. You weren't even there either. But then you were. So Monty is specifically calling out the fact that regardless of gobblegum machines and perk changes and slightly shifted mechanics wrenched from their rightful place, the characters were also just plonked in there in Chronicles as well, where they have no rightful place to be. I mean, sure, you can say Dempsey, one of the Verrückt Marines, okay, you can let that slide, but beyond that, it's kind of hard to see why the characters would be at Nachtrandtoten in the first place, or why the other three would all be together at Verrückt in the first place. Like, just in terms of the story, it doesn't really feel right. And this is something that I think is a really interesting change in Chronicles. Treyarch will have known that we would see those characters in those old maps and be surprised by it, be confused, be puzzled, and as such, I think that there has to be some kind of deliberate line of thinking that they are going for in terms of communication of an idea that we haven't necessarily fully sussed out just yet. The fact that, for example, in Revelations, we have that Dempsey cipher. In fact, let me pull it up real quick. Here it is. I am the last of us, but I will be joining you soon, my friends. Death is near. I hope what we have done doesn't come back to bite this universe in the arse. Maybe, now with us all gone, the children will truly be safe. from D, which we presume to be Dempsey. So with those sorts of messages in there, which is essentially a character being in a place that we have no knowledge of and shouldn't really be seeing at all, because Revelations is meant to be the cessation of this loop. It's meant to be the end of the Ouroboros tale, I suppose, and then bring things back to the generation of Primus, the genesis of Primus, that's basically in the Great War way back when, before Origins even happened. That's what we're meant to be seeing there, but we're then seeing this entirely new perspective of a character being once removed from that loop and looking back at it in retrospect and saying, well, we've done something else here, we've escaped the loop somehow potentially, we've gone through some other kind of change, and as such, hopefully, the children will truly be safe. That cipher, in my mind, has a very similar air to the fact that the characters also shouldn't be in Nachtrun Toten. Clearly, Monty has just plopped them in there, just for our own gameplay, basically, but I feel like there's got to be some kind of deeper significance to it that right now, I'm just not really sure of. I think if we look at the Chronicles story trailer, that potentially gives us a little bit of a kind of nudge in a particular direction, because we see Samantha playing with her snow globe, and then the kind of spirit essence that is present throughout that trailer wafts its way through all of the maps. It goes through Nacht and Verrückt and Shino and Kino, etc. It goes through all of them and gives us an insight into the new interpretation of those maps that are obviously from the past, and I don't know, I just feel like there's got to be some kind of relation to the fact that you've got the new characters now, or rather the new versions of our current characters, in the old maps with things that are new in the old maps, and then you have this spirit going through the old maps that are now the new maps, and you've also obviously got the fact that they shouldn't even be there in the first place, and I'm just left wondering what it is that Treyarch are planning. I wonder. I haven't heard, so far, any convincing explanation from myself or from anyone else really as to why exactly this is the case, because I feel fairly unsatisfied with the idea that this is just a thing that Treyarch have to do just because of whatever, like time constraints or saving space or whatever. I feel like that's just not a good answer. There's got to be some more depth to this. There's got to be more. And I don't know what it is just yet, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, but without a doubt, we can all agree on the fact that with the removal of the quotes, specifically, they drew a line, like I said at the beginning of the video, and made a distinction between the old stuff that they were going to preserve, the new stuff they were going to push into the old stuff, and the newer stuff that they were actually going to still keep separate, despite the fact that that newer stuff was originally pushed into the old stuff when they pushed the new stuff into the old stuff. It's a bit of a weird one, like I said. In summary, rewriting history is probably going to turn out pretty messily. Rewriting rewritten history is guaranteed to be a mess, but rewriting your rewrite of rewritten history is on another level that only Treyarch stand on right now. While it's confusing as all hell and definitely worth more discussion in the comments down below and in future videos from me, I goddamn love it. I've been MrRoflWaffles, please leave a like on the video if you've enjoyed, and I'll be discussing this soon in other zombies videos. Bye bye.